Advance to the next slide, please. I'd like for everyone to take a moment and breathe in, 2, 3, 4. Breathe out, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. This is the air we breathe that's around us every day. It's important, next slide please, that we recognize from today's talk and from what Patrick had discussed around clean indoor air, and not just during wildfires, but during everyday work. My name is Janice Dibbin. I'm a respiratory therapist, a respiratory educator with South Shore Health. And I've been in the industry for a long time. I had the privilege to train in another province in Northern Alberta Institute of Technology and did my practicum at the University of Alberta Hospital. Next slide, please. So today we're thinking about where we spend time breathing air, whether it's indoor air or outside air. And I think it's important for people to understand that during the pandemic, things have certainly changed around work location. Next slide, please. We have lots of these in our home, the HVAC, which is what Patrick had spoken about. Unfortunately, I teach along the South Shore. Not unfortunately, but unfortunately for a lot of my population, they don't have access to HVAC. So I'll talk a little bit more on that. Next slide, please. And of course, I'd like for us to think about the air that's around us when we're outside, enjoying our 1/3 of our day, hopefully outside in a 24-hour period. Next slide, please. As I had mentioned, the pandemic has caused a lot of us and our clients to increase the amount of time they are spending in their own home, and people who are working from home. Location of the home office is quite important, and as well as the air quality in that space. In particular, I would like to speak about radon and how it does affect people unknowingly. Next slide, please. And that's what I'm trying to speak of when I talk about being climatized. So why in lung disease that's different for everybody. The air outside sometimes becomes extremely difficult for people with moderate to severe respiratory disease. And so I like using tools like the Air Quality Health Index to help bring home the point about particulate in the air with high pollen counts and that type of thing. But we've met with a new air quality issue now around working from home and what that entails. Next slide, please. This is a little bit more technical and goes back a long time. So if there's younger respiratory therapists in the audience, please forgive me if I've misspoke about anything. But the two gases, the main two within the alveolar lung with that we breathe in oxygen, it goes through the airways to the air sacs. That's what those circles there represent. The oxygen goes across the membrane into carbon dioxide. Now, for people with end stage COPD or severe COPD, they have what is the phenomena called air trapping. So they already have a high amount of CO2 within their air sacs. And as you know, oxygen and carbon dioxide oppose each other. So that becomes an increasing problem for people with lung disease. So you add on top of that high barometric pressure and the low ceiling within the environment or the air, plus you add in particulate from smoke or pollen. It just is a recipe for disaster for people with lung disease. Next slide, please. This is a teaching tool that I use frequently around COPD to try to help people understand where does our air go and why do we have so much trouble breathing out. Next slide, please. As you can see over time, the airways are affected, but with severe, moderate to severe COPD, it becomes, the air sacs actually become stretched and they don't work or exchange the gas, and that's where the air trapping comes into play. Now with people with asthma, primarily it is an airways disease. Their air sacs at the end of the airways are healthy, relatively healthy, and work properly for gas exchange. But with asthma, it's the inflammation in the airways and poor air quality, high pollen count, smog or fog. Those can trigger certain allergic people with asthma and inflame their airways. Next slide, please. And this briefly, just to be quicker, is a slide showing the differences in the etiology between asthma and COPD. Next slide, please. That's probably a little boring to some of you. It's important that you know your triggers. So for people who live with lung disease, and air pollution and weather changes is more prevalent than we realize, especially at sea level. Next slide, please. And just to give you an idea, this is some of the stuff that I teach. Next slide. Thank you, Michelle. You're doing great. Next slide, please. Okay, so our new indoor time away from our office work. Again, I mentioned about the location of the home office, the air quality in that space, tools, and radon hotspots. What I mean by radon hotspots, as you are aware, I'm also a friend of the Lung Association and a volunteer, and we have done some outreach work on education around radon. HRM has done a fantastic program with the libraries on getting radon detectors to the population of the HRM. And I personally have taken an interest in how it works. I purchased a real-time radon detector through Air Things and Home Depot, and it's amazing how well it trends with the detector that you can get from the Lung Association, and to check the amount of radon within your home. Next slide, please. And these are just some of the lung health stats. I didn't use your picture, Robert, because I was reminded last night, no pictures of people. And so this is one of the displays that we use when we do some education around radon. Important to remember that it is the leading cause of lung cancer in non-smokers and the second leading cause of lung cancer in smokers. Next slide, please. This is what a radon remediation fan looks like for people who have not seen one before. And it works in older homes by drilling a 4-inch hole down through the slab. The pipe is put down under the slab, and the fan exhausts the radon out from under your home to the outside. Next slide, please. This is a good radon reading in real time with the real-time radon detectors. Where you want to see, you can actually use it with an app on your phone. Next slide, please. This is a bad radon reading when you see the red circle. I personally, by the time my career ends, would like to see a radon detector like a smoke detector and a carbon monoxide detector in every indoor space. However, I'm not sure how that would happen financially, but I think that that would be fantastic. Next slide, please. Environment. So when we think about the environment and barometric pressure, the jet stream, and climate change, those are big topics and are a little bit beyond my scope. I really enjoy working and teaching about barometric pressure because I live and grew up the South Shore of Nova Scotia. I work right across from the hall where I was born. But I did have the opportunity to live in Alberta, which is a higher elevation. Next slide, please. And of course, this is a little technical, but it's based around how barometric pressure, that's your P little b in the equation, affects the oxygen in the ambient air, and the amount of oxygen that you carry in your blood, that's PaAO2, and that gradient. So it's 760 millimeters of mercury pressure at sea level, the barometric pressure. But of course, when you live in Alberta, it's a different barometric pressure. So it's somewhere around 720 or 714. And that inevitably affects the equation and how the gases within your lung act at higher elevations. Next slide, please. And we've already seen that slide, but it's important in respiratory disease. Next slide, please. Again, this is a breakdown of the AA gradient that I speak of. The dry pressure they talk about here is the water pressure, and that has always stayed the same. The barometric pressure is a changing number. And of course, when you look at FiO2, we say 21%. However, fractionated oxygen in the environment is 21%. But if you're in a very high populated urban concrete jungle and there is no green space, that number can be lower. Next slide, please. And I won't bore you anymore with that equation. Next slide, please. And one more. So I've given you a few things to think about. I'm open to questions. I know that there is some technical stuff in there that's probably not really relevant to your practices in the environment, but the one thing I would like to see for a takeaway, if we could advance to the next slide, please. Oh, sorry, yes, that's not all places can. Particulate in the air can be a good thing, by the way. Next slide, please. Some of the takeaways. I just wanted to give a shout out to Discover Nova Scotia and the provincial projects that are going on finally getting high-speed internet access to our part of the province down in Southwest Nova. I apologize if a sampling station for air quality has been placed there since I did up this presentation. I always thought they were placed at the top part of the province, but now that we have the internet access, it would be great to help if we had a sampling station in Southwest Nova to collect the data from sea level, from the jet stream, from the barometric pressure and the particulate in the air in that area. Okay, I hope I was able to help you understand a little bit about lung disease and how air quality affects, and it's not all the same in all areas. And if there's any questions, next slide. I'm happy to entertain those now.